Our next speaker, I have two more speakers for you. Our next speaker is Philipa Harvey. Philipa is a primary teacher, trade union activist and socialist. She's been active in the labour movement for more than 30 years, including as an executive committee member of the National Union of Teachers and the National Education Union. And she has served on the TUC General Council. She's been chair of the TUC Women's Committee and is a past president of the NUT, now the NEU. She has a long history of challenging sexism and sexual harassment in schools, in her own union and in the wider trade union movement through the creation of resources, schemes of work, training materials, policies, the organising of conferences and events and political organising. She is a founding member of Women's Place UK.
Thank you very much. This morning, as we discuss women's autonomy in the labour movement, I want to begin by saying, one, it has to be built on the premise of equality. That means confronting racism head-on and ensuring that women's rights are at the centre of everything that we do. Two, that we are...
They're asking what you said.
Oh, sorry. Two, that we are clearly in a fight to be had. There is a fight to be had in the left movement, just as there is everywhere. But walking away is not an option. Look at what Labour Women's Declaration are doing in the Labour Party and the work that they are doing there. And three, we have to be at the centre of these movements, because if we're not there, they are not going to be working for us, but against us. So, I'm going to share with you some examples of what women have done to shape the movement so far and the potential for us to continue to shape it so that it reflects our needs in the workplace and beyond, influencing wider society. Remember, women have been at the very heart of this the trade union movement from the outset. The match workers, the chain makers, Dagenham women. Women win when women organise. So we've learnt from these women, learnt from their successes, their willingness to stand up and their courage in that. If the systems and the mechanisms are not working for you, you have to get in there and expose them and change them. To do this, you have to know how they are currently working, or maybe I should say more accurately, how they are not working well enough for you, for women yet. You have to understand the barriers to women being involved, to being able to share, develop, and implement their ideas. These barriers have to be challenged and removed by exposing the inequality that lies behind them. So, understand the structures and the rules and change them based on data, facts, law, and rational argument. I want to give you some examples of what this can look like. First, you have to get women talking and realising that their union, this movement, is relevant and can work for them. So, in the NEU, we set up women's networks. Women created these networks for ourselves and for other women. They were informal. They were not policy making. They did not fall within the formal structures of the union. Therefore, these women developed the format, the mechanisms, the structures under which they would operate. Union staff were invited to support their work, and as the activities and their impact began to grow, they began to report to regional councils, and then regional councils began to support the networks. We organised events to explore the history of suffragettes, the match workers, abortion rights, women's roles in international solidarity and stereotyping. Emboldened and supported by other women in the union, we went back to the formal union structures and started to organise for change. Women had organised and won space, put women's issues onto the agenda successfully, but they had also brought more women into activity, into union activity. Women were asked to speak about organising, and this model of building activism was replicated in other areas of the union. Now it was time to tackle the policy-making bodies of the union. This meant challenging and changing rules. We couldn't rely on the goodwill of the movement to recognise that it should be representative of its membership. We would have to ensure that it was. Rule changes had to be brought in. We needed to hear from women, and this meant hearing from women speak at conference in debate. So our first, modest demand was that at least half the speakers in a union that is 75% of women needed to be women. I know, you'd think, wouldn't you? We proposed a system to ensure that happened, despite the arguments that women might not want to speak. Again, you'd think. Now, once a motion is in debate, the speakers are ordered. This is what happens now. Female, not female. And the percentage of women speaking at our conference is now around 60%. This means we are also increasing the number of new and young speakers, as well as speakers from minoritised groups. We are getting there. We were prepared. We had the data that showed that the unions were not representing our membership. We stood firm. We organised. We campaigned. We also had the technology, and we won. And the union is better for it. Next, we needed to look at the leadership, the executive. Again, it had to represent the membership. So it needed to be at least 50% women. We put a motion to have a working party where we developed the rationale and the logistics on that working party. We had the data, the facts, and the wherewithal to do it. At conference, we had a strong case for rule changes. And again, despite the arguments that women might not want to come forward, we won. And lo and behold, we now have an executive that has more than 50% women. This has now also had the impact that there is an expectation that the national union delegations, committees, etc. are 50% women. This is not a written rule, but it is an expectation. And the NEU has just agreed to improve this further by ensuring that at the next executive election, 2/3 of those elected will be women. There is still work to do, but we do not have illusions. We need to increase the representation of women delegates at conference. This is where our policy is decided. This is where voting is carried out. We know women are underrepresented. If there's a rule that says a delegation must be 50% women, branches have to work harder to find the women who are active locally. They are there. We know this because we know that women are well represented at rep level. We also know it because in some branches they've been monitoring their delegations for a number of years to ensure they represent their membership. And these branches do send more women to represent their members. This work has taken time, but we have won. And now we have ingrained women into the movement. This is why we should continue, because it's our movement. And if we walk away, we concede. And those victories that the match workers, the chain makers, the Dagenham women, and each group of women in their own unions who've made that space in the union say we were only ever visitors, and we most certainly were not. This movement is not perfect. It is also not entirely lost or won. It is down to us as women activists within this movement to follow in the footsteps of the women of the past and make it work for women now. We must maintain the space that women in the movement have won and set the agenda to win more, whether that means working within or outside the existing structures. Then the movement must be made to work for the women here and outside in society. Thank you very much.